It's good to be with you this evening. This evening we're going to be continuing on the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5, which of course is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount does begin with these Beatitudes. And Beatitudes, just in repeating this, are pronouncement of blessings. That someone will be blessed or someone will be happy. But there's a better word than happy. It's happy. It has associations with happenstance. And that is certain things that may happen that make you very satisfied and bring about a positive emotion from you. But just as likely, something go wrong and then you're not happy anymore because of happenstance. But a blessing is something that's more permanent. A blessing is something that remains there regardless of happenstance, regardless of what may be going on in our life, the ups, the downs, the drearies, the wonderfuls. Someone who is blessed through all of that. And as we stated last week, these Beatitudes are the antithesis. They are the opposite of what the world would have us to believe. Just in this first one, which we did last week, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay? So, with the world would not say that. The world would say, blessed are the boastful. Who can boast? Blessed are the self-assured. Blessed are the aggressive. Blessed are the ones who get their way. Blessed are the business successful. All of that would be blessings from the world. Blessed are the rich, blessed are the beautiful, blessed are the famous, blessed are when everyone loves you. Well, that's the way the world thinks, but that is not true. That's not reality, and it's not what Christ is giving us. Now, this evening, we want to begin in verse 5. We've already done poor in spirit, those who mourn. And this evening, we start with this one. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. We want to speak about that just for a few minutes. Blessed are the meek. So you have the poor in spirit, you have the mourn, now you have the meek. What is meekness? Well, meekness rhymes with weakness, but it's not weakness. It's not weak at all. Meek is in fact power that is controlled, power that is under control. Meekness is putting yourself in a proper place and a proper attitude among all. It is much easier to deal with a group of meek people than a group of highly assertive and aggressive and arrogant people. I probably told you this before, I don't remember, but I had a friend that confided in me one time. He said, when I enter a room of people, I immediately think I'm the smartest one in this room. And he said, is that bad? And I said, yeah. There's a problem there. Okay, yeah, you need, that's a really, really bad thing. And that's easy, though. That's easy because it's just, you're dealing with yourself. And if you can't control yourself, you can't control anything. So just that's all it takes. And with meekness is in understanding one's place with everybody else, with everything, God and the rest of mankind. And it is meekness that does not get the headlines ever. Meekness does not, except with Moses, the meekest man in the world, which is Scripture, not headlines. The world doesn't care a thing about that. But the meekness an act of meekness does not get you into the limelight, but it does bring about blessing. And here in this is, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, once again, can we put these things to the test? The meek shall inherit the earth. The arrogant come and go, and the arrogant seem to have their little flash in the pan, and then they're gone. Every generation has its the proud, the boastful, the arrogant, the high and the mighty of looking down their nose at everyone else. But it's not blessed are the aristocrats, and I use that as not a literal term. If someone's born a duke, they're born a duke, but that doesn't mean they have to act anything other than meek. But the blessed are the aristocrats because they're better than anybody else, or blessed are the powerful because they control everybody else. That's not it. Let's just ask some questions. What happened to Adolf Hitler? Okay. What happened to those who were following Adolf Hitler? Did they inherit the earth? I mean, he gave the promise to the German people that they would. He gave them the promise. Did that actually occur? That there were writers prior to a generation or two before Adolf Hitler that were writing the same thing. And we can go back even further than that. And they have nothing to do with the German people, but those talking about seizing every opportunity, those of taking advantage of whatever you can, whenever you can do it. And it's that survival by tooth and by claw. And I asked this question, and it wasn't that long ago. How many of the royal family of Europe do you actually know? I'm talking about the royal families that went through the medieval ages and the Habsburgs. How many Habsburgs do you know? I don't know one. All right, I don't know a single one. But at one point, they ruled Europe. At one point, in Austria and Spain and numerous places, there were Habsburgs. How many do you know today? Not a single one. I don't know. How many meek people today do you know? Well, I know a lot of meek people, actually. I know a lot. And we continue to go generation to generation with more meek people. Meekness is precisely one of the Beatitudes and one of the characteristics Christ wants out of us. And it is one of the characteristics that makes us the noble creatures we were made to be. We are noble creatures. And there are certain things about us, obviously, that are less than noble. We have our physical failings. We have difficulties that we go through. But it's the character that makes you, you. It's the character inside. And it's that character of meekness goes a long way with God. God does not resist the meek. Who does he resist? He resists the proud. That's who he resists. Meekness doesn't come before a fall. What comes before a fall? Pride comes before a fall. Now, let's go from here to Psalm 37, because Psalm 37, actually, if anyone in the days of Christ disagreed with what he said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. If anyone disagreed with that, all he would have to do is, turn to Psalm 37. You must disagree with Psalm 37 too, because Psalm 37 is saying the same thing. If we go just to verse 11, but the meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. They can have peace. The meek can have peace. Others stirring up folks, they're not going to have much peace. And others that are agitating others, dividing others, that make themselves into someone, they're not going to have a whole lot of peace. But the meek shall inherit the earth. Let's go to verse 9. For evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait on the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. So we have this same phrase, they shall inherit the earth, means they have posterity. Their posterity continues on. And they continue on in this, and the Lord looks down on them with pleasure. The meek, with mercy to the meek. Now, let's go to verse 22. For those blessed by him shall inherit the earth, and those cursed by him shall be cut off. They'll be cut off. Let's go to verse 29. The righteous shall inherit the land and dwell in it forever. All of this giving that same kind of idea of here is an inheritance that is perpetual. It's perpetual for the meek. It's perpetual for the righteous. It's perpetual for those who are actually doing the will of God. It is for them. They continue on. Now, let's just ask a question. Let's think of how many sects and how many religions there were in the first century. And then ask the question, the first century, and then ask the question, how many of those remain today? And then ask the question, okay, of those remaining today, how many of those actually are practicing what they practiced in the first century? And the answer to that question, answer to the first question is how many religions in the first century are still practiced today? That would just be a minute handful, and I do mean a minute handful. Obviously, Judaism continues today. But we come to the second question of how many actually practice it the way it was in the first century. And yeah, that knocks Judaism out. There would be other things that would have been around in the first century that don't make it very far in time. And others that do, but they are entirely different than what they were in the first century. But there's only one religion that has remained the same, and that's the church. That's the religion that Christ brings us, that Christ established. It is the church. That's it. That's the only one. And I have to say this, that if the church you are going to, that you can clearly say, well, we're not the same as described in the first century, then I would suggest you take a long look at where you're attending. That you take a long look and make comparisons. That if it isn't identical to the beliefs and to the practices found in the first century, that are good examples in the New Testament, that are following the examples and the patterns and the commands of the New Testament. If it's not doing that, then you need to be where it is being practiced. You need to go where it is being practiced. In every religion and every denomination can be judged. Every religious group can be judged. Is it following the New Testament pattern or not? And if it's not following the New Testament pattern, you need to look at that New Testament pattern closely, and it can be committed today. Every bit of it can be committed. Now, let's go back to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. You know, he says, blessed are the meek. Well, he's saying his followers are going to be the meek. His followers are going to be the meek. And my previous point just now was that his church continues on. Roman Empire, not around. Pharisees, Sadducees, Sanhedrin court, not around anymore. The temple complex in Jerusalem, the temple, not around anymore. The Caesars, not around anymore. Those things the door is slammed on them centuries ago, and the church continues. The church continues precisely as it began, by the strength of Christ and the providence of his protection. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now we go to verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Just this morning we looked at 2 Timothy chapter 3, and concerning those that are always learning but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. And then we see why that's the case, that they reject the truth. Just as those rebellious rejected Moses in the past, there are those in the present who reject the truth of Christ. They have learned it, they just don't like it. So one could say they really don't hunger and thirst for righteousness. They hunger and thirst for something else, but it's not righteousness. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness is someone that wants it badly, wants it more than anything else. They hunger for it. They want it. They want it in themselves and they want it out of others. And to hunger and thirst for righteousness is to work at whatever it takes to find it, and once you have found it, to accept the truth. Once you have found it, to accept the truth. And we can see time and time again of where in the biblical text, let's just go to Galatians chapter 5. In the biblical text are things that even the critics of the Bible have to say, that's a good idea. These are good things. Now, of course, you have those that are on the crazy fringes of sanity that would deny everything. They would deny it all. But we go to verse 22. So Galatians chapter 5, verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Look at this next one. Against such there is no law. There's no law against this. And people recognize these things as being good. Whether they follow or not, it's a different matter. But they recognize these things as being good. Love, joy, peace. What's wrong with that? Long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. What's wrong with all that? They may choose a different path, but they do enjoy it when others treat them well and treat them fairly and treat them lovingly and want peace with them and are gentle with them. Everyone appreciates that. There is no law against these things. There is no law. That everyone recognizes, yes, these are good. But here is the thing. The one who hungers and thirsts after righteousness recognizes these things as being righteous and accepts them. And here comes the next part. Does them. Applies these things into their life. Recognizing it not only as good, but as we are morally obligated to be those things. We have a complete obligation to God that we are to commit ourselves to this. And once again, these are characteristics that make us the noble creatures we are. The noble creatures we are. We're not noble because we have strength, or that we are creative, or that we can communicate, or we can show emotion. That does not make us noble. What makes us noble is, one, we're made in the image of God. Number two, taking on the characteristics that God wants us to take, which happens to be the characteristics of Christ. Taking on that, and we become the people we were intended to be, the creation we were intended to be. That's what makes us noble. A man can be physically weak and not very attractive in the least, and someone that doesn't have too many skills in the least, but be very noble by holding on to those Beatitudes, by holding on to the fruits of the Spirit, by truly being righteous as defined by God, not by us, as defined by God. We don't get to define the terms. We don't get to decide what righteousness is or is not, Because if we get to decide, that means there is no definition at all. It's whatever you want it to be at the moment. And that would be ever shifting for the individual, not to mention for large groups of people. But we come back to verse 6. Matthew 5, verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And here is the promise, as each one of these has a promise. There is this pattern in the Beatitudes, starting off with blessed are those. Then the characteristic that's supposed to be there. Then for they shall, and there is the result. There is a result in this. They shall be filled. You go to your average library, your average bookstore, look in whatever section you want for a book that's going to give you something because you are hungering for and thirsting for righteousness. And look at, let's just start with the philosophy section. Any library, typical library bookstore, philosophy section. Which philosopher holds the truth you need for righteousness? And some of them, it doesn't take you very long to figure out, this guy isn't talking about righteousness at all. He's talking about things that are so off the wall or so impractical, they come to an absolute zero. It helps no one with anything. Nothing whatsoever. And others, you come to understand that this person isn't righteous. This person is heading you off in a different direction entirely, into just brutality. That of seeking your own, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. Which one can give the promise? Which philosopher can give the promise, you shall be filled, and hold on to that promise? And in fact, give that, fulfill it. Who can do it? And the answer is none. All right, so we go away from the philosophical section and we go to the religious section. Which one of those books and all the religious section can in fact, for the one who hungers and thirsts for righteousness, can fill them with everything they need? And that'd be quite a number that you could toss out quickly because they don't do it. And there would be those that are written by, we will use the term loosely, Christian, that while they evoke the name of Christ and they can speak of His will and they can speak of things, I've read some of these where there is some value to it. And basically what they're doing is pointing you to the Bible anyway. And the more, we will call them meek, and the more honest ones will point you to the Bible anyway, of where this is, everything that they're saying is biblical, and you need to go there to get more. And there are those that are worthless. I won't name names, but I remember being given a book by a rather famous religious author, and I read the book. It didn't take me very long to read the book, and someone asked me, they came and saw that I had that book and said, what's that book about? And I can honestly say, I have no idea. It was nothing but fluff. Did it help me in anything? No, it didn't. It was all kind of feel good, I suppose. There was no meat there. It was like eating cotton candy. That there was no nutritional value to it. Hungering, thirsting for righteousness, all you're getting is cotton candy. That's all you're getting, at best, with some of these. Who can actually fulfill this promise? And it's Christ. He says He can do it, and He can do it. All spiritual blessings are through Christ. If you are okay with not receiving every spiritual blessing or any spiritual blessing, well, you don't want Christ. Matter of fact, if you don't want Christ, you forget about any spiritual blessing. You will receive physical blessings, yeah, because God is merciful. But spiritual blessings, no. Not at all. Because clearly, hungering and thirsting for righteousness means you must have righteousness. You must. We do hunger, and when we do, we know we need to eat. It's not just that I feel hungry and I want to alleviate that. It's that I realize that I need to eat in order to live, and so I eat. All right, and someone would say, no, you live to eat. We know that. Well, okay, but just follow me on this. We won't make this so personal. But it is knowing that you need something. Same thing when you're thirsty. You know you need to drink water. You know you've got to have something to drink. Especially if it's in the middle of July, you've been out in the sun, and it comes on pretty hard, and you got to get something to drink, or there's going to be problems. There's going to be problems. Spiritually, we must eat. Spiritually, we must drink, and it is Christ that provides that living water. It's Christ that gives that bread from heaven. He gives that, and no one else can. But only those who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness are going to want that. Only they are going to want that. And He promises they will be filled. He promises that. And matter of fact, if we just go to chapter 7, so continuing on in the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 7, beginning in verse 7, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Or what man is there among you, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good gifts to those who ask Him? Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Now, we want to look at here, chapter 7, verse 7 through 11, that God will supply. If you ask, well, what does He say? It will be given. You knock, and it'll be open to you. You seek, and you will find. It is there. It's there for us. And that is a promise that Christ gives to everybody. Everybody. That's not a promise that's only to His servants, only to members of the church, only to those in His family. That's a promise that's to everybody. Ask and you will receive. That's a promise. Now, we need to temper that as often we do. There are certain things you can ask for that's against the will of God, and the answer will be no. You can ask for something that's absurdly against the will of God, and the answer would be, of course not. But when it comes to what God is willing to give you, and that is to fill you with His words, to fill you with His righteousness, if you are hungering and thirsting for that, if you're asking for that, you will be filled. If that's what you're seeking, you will find it. If that is the door you're knocking on, it will be opened. It will be, and those are assurances given by God. But just like those who are poor in spirit, if you don't have this attribute, you're not going to care a thing about being filled with righteousness at all. You're not going to care a thing about it. Someone who desires this will find it and will be filled. Just this morning we went to John chapter 4. Let's go there again. We'll read a different section now. But we will we'll begin. So here we have Jesus. He's in a Samaritan village, and there is a woman, Samaritan woman, who is there at the well. And we go to verse 7. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans." That's a good question. Here's a different man. He's Jewish. Obviously he is. This is not typical. The Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. That I think that the Jews would rather have just continued being thirsty for a little while longer than to ask a Samaritan to draw any water or to give water. But Jesus answered, verse 10, and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Now he's using the subject of water to now talk about living water. If you knew who it was, he's not just a Jew that is there. He's not just another man that is there. This happens to be the Messiah who is there. Right there at the well. At the well she's been going to all these years. Here is the Messiah. And if you knew who it was that asks you of these things, you would ask, and he would have given you living water. That's a promise that's not just to this Samaritan woman. It's a promise to everybody, to everyone. And she tries to make sense out of it. That the woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water?" Obviously, this is different. It's not just water. This is living water. And verse 13, Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." Okay, that's not regular water. That's not physical water. This has to be something else, and yet it happens to be his teaching. His teaching, that is the water from which we live spiritually. Without that water, you're not going to live spiritually. Without that food, without that bread of heaven, you're not going to live spiritually. You will die away. And I'm talking about spiritually die away. You cannot have any type of real spiritual strength. You cannot have any real kind of spiritual blessing. You can't have any of those things without the water that he gives and the bread that he gives. And that requires hungering and thirsting for his water and his bread, which happens to include righteousness. That's what is to be desired more than anything. If we were to go, and we will, if we go to the book of Proverbs, the book of Proverbs starts out discussing what its advantage. The advantage of this book, yes, the advantage of wisdom that is given here. We just go to verse 7. So Proverbs 1, verse 7, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." Boy, how that is true. How that is true. Just would rather mock and live in the foolishness than to take a moment and look at wisdom. "My son, hear," verse 8, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother, for they will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains around your neck." Then he continues to talk about this. Verse 20, "Wisdom calls aloud outside. She raises her voice in the open square. She cries out in the chief concourses at the openings of the gate in the city. She speaks her words. How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? For scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge." Scorners delight in their scorning. The simple love their simplicity. Fools hate knowledge. Any blessing pronounced on the scornful, on those who mock? Any blessing given to the fools? Are there any blessings that given to the simple ones, with that idea of one who is just really living in folly, and can make a joke out of anything, and lightheartedly just dismissive? Is there any blessings pronounced for them? No. No, there's none. And the book of Proverbs is given in the hopes of changing the simple one into a wise one, the scornful into the appreciative and the grateful, and that of the fool away from what is foolish and to what is righteous. What is righteous? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. There is the promise. And these are all pronouncement of blessings on a precise group of people, holding these characteristics in their heart and committing their lives to it. And a person now being reformed into the character of Christ, reformed by His words. This evening we need to look at our own lives. This evening we are here and we have our opportunity to make whatever corrections we need to make. We ask, if we can help you in any way, if you need to respond to the invitation, that you come as we stand and sing.